In this video, we're going to look at how to make a cinematic war scene on a very tiny scale. Today we're shooting in my garage. I've got an array of old plastic toy soldiers and other little props, and my plan is to use them to create a miniature battlefield. But this isn't just an excuse to get out some of my old favourite toys, it's also an exercise in the power of mood lighting. I'm going to light paint my scene with a torch, then use a red LED to bring it to life with little sparks and streaks. First I need to dress my scene. I've got some black sheeting for a dark backdrop, and I've positioned a table in front to place my soldiers on. I want to create a sense of depth to my scene, so I'm arranging the scenery and figures on three distinct planes. First, the foreground, where I've sprinkled the surface with some dirt, then placed my soldiers side on to make strong shapes that will work in silhouette. Behind this is the midground. Here I've placed a few vehicles and trees, plus a couple more figures. Finally, the background. Here I've fashioned a couple of hills using an old coat to give the impression of a distant landscape. I also want to add in a little smoke to heighten the mood. I've used a vape for this, filled with nicotine-free liquid to create the smoke effect. I blow the vapour behind the figures, then when I shine the torch through it from behind, it gives me the contrast I need to make the figures stand out in silhouette. If you'd rather not blow the vapour with your mouth, then you could always use a squeezy air blower to suck up the vapour and then blow it out. A tripod is essential for this. It allows me to use a long exposure of 5 seconds, which gives me time to shine the torch over the scene. The tripod also gives me the option to shoot several frames in alignment, so I can piece them together in Photoshop, and more on that later in the video. As for exposure settings, I'm in manual mode with shutter speed at 5 seconds, aperture f20 for plenty of depth of field, and ISO 100. A cable release comes in handy here, as it means I can fire off shots without nudging the camera. When painting with light, it's usually best to keep the ambient light to a minimum, so I've blocked the windows and turned off the overhead lights. In near darkness, I can begin painting my scene. First, I blow the vapour behind the figures, then shine the torch through the fog and fire the shutter. Then I've got 5 seconds to move the torch around and backlight my scene. The important thing here is to keep the light behind the figures so that the smoke is illuminated rather than the figures themselves. I want stark silhouettes with minimal detail. Light painting can be a bit unpredictable, but by doing this in stages and over different frames, I can have several bites of the cherry, carefully illuminating the foreground, then, when satisfied, moving on to the midground and the backdrop in turn. As for my red LED, I hold it next to the barrel of a gun, then fire the shutter and pull it away. This results in a streak of red light that I can combine with the rest of my images later. And this brings us to the Photoshop part of the video. Here's how my finished image looks. Now, let's take a look at how it's been pieced together. So here we are in Adobe Bridge, and these are the images that I've chosen to combine for my project here. So if I just scroll through them, you can see I've lit each part of the scene in turn. And you can see up here, this is where I've shone my torch. So in some shots, the torch is actually in the frame, but that's fine because we can always remove it later. So let's have a quick look through so you can see I've lit the foreground, then the midground here, and then these background details here. And I've also captured a few little flashes with the red light here with my red LED, and I'll combine these with everything else too. So now let's open all of these images up into Photoshop. In fact, first of all, I'm just going to open up the images of the smoke. I'm going to leave the red flashes for now. So I'm going to click on the last of those smoke images, then hold Shift and click on the first just to select all of those. So now I've got 6 photos selected there. Then I can open all of these into a layered document here in Adobe Bridge by going to Tools, Photoshop, and we're going to load files into Photoshop Layers. And after a few seconds, they'll all open up into Photoshop. Now, if I bring up my Layers panel here by going to Window Layers here in Photoshop, you can see how each image now sits on its own separate layer here. and I'm going to hide all but the bottom layer. So I'm going to hold Alt and click on the eye icon here on the bottom layer, and this will hide everything else. Then what I'll do is reveal each layer in turn and mask it. So I'm going to highlight the layer above the bottom layer and click the eye icon to reveal it, and I'll toggle it off and on a couple of times just to kind of assess which areas I want to use. And I can see I want to use this area here. So now I'm going to add a full mask to this layer. I can do this by holding Alt and clicking the Add Layer Mask icon here at the very bottom of the Layers panel here. And this adds a full black mask onto that layer. Now, a black mask means that everything is hidden, but while this mask thumbnail here is highlighted, and you can see it's highlighted at the moment, I can paint with white over my image to selectively reveal parts of that layer. So I can grab the brush tool here, and I want to set my foreground color to white, so I can hit D to do that. And I also want to make sure my brush opacity is at 100%. And I can use the left and right square bracket keys on my keyboard to resize my brush tip. I also need to right click and make sure my hardness is right down at 0, and that allows us to create these kind of smooth transitions between our layers. And then I can start painting over the area that I want to reveal. So you can see how I'm able to blend my images in this way. So I can paint over this area here, and you can see I've revealed this little section up here that I don't really want. So I can hit X to flip my foreground color to black, and then I can paint to hide that area. So you can see I'm able to reveal or hide areas of my layer mask. You can see on my layer mask here, the white area is revealed and everything else is hidden. Now we just need to do the same for the next layer. So I'll highlight it and reveal it, and then I can see I want to reveal this area here in the middle. So I'm going to hold Alt and click the Add Layer Mask icon again to hide it. I can hit X to flip my foreground color to white again and paint to reveal this section of the image here. Now, it's actually looking a bit too strong. I think I shined the torch over the smoke here a bit too long, and it's come out a bit too bright. So what I can do is make parts of this layer semi-transparent. So I can do that. If I hit X to flip my foreground color to black again, black allows me to hide, remember, then I can just paint to hide that area. So I'll just hide it down to about there. I'll hit X again to go back to white. And this time I'm going to paint at a lower opacity. So I'm going to bring my opacity of my brush down to about 20%. And then now as I paint, you can see I can gradually reveal that section. Rather than revealing it all at once, I'm able to gradually reveal it, which gives me a smoother transition between these different elements in my image here. Now I'll do the same for the next layer, highlight and reveal it, add a layer mask to it, add a full layer mask, and then paint with white to reveal it. And again, I'll just reveal it gradually to kind of build it up like this. And let's work on through our last few layers here. So now we're on to our foreground elements. Again, I'll reveal it, have a look at what I want to include, Alt click the Add Mask icon, and then paint with my brush tool. I'm going to set my brush tool back to 100%. I can hit 0 to quickly do that, and then paint to reveal this area here like this. Let's move my layers mask out of the way for a moment so I can see exactly what's happening here. So now you can see we're gradually building up our scene. Let's do the same with the top layer here. Highlight and reveal it, add a layer mask to it, and then paint to reveal the area like this. So you can see how quickly we can build up our scene in this way. Now let's add in a few flashes of light. So I'm going to go back into Bridge again, and I'm going to open my flashes. So I'm just going to hold Shift and click on all of them again, and I'm just going to drag them into my document like this, and then just hit Enter to apply so they all open up within my image here. So now I've got 4 flash layers here. I'm just going to hold Shift and click between the top and the bottom layer to highlight all of them. And I'm going to change the blend mode here. I'm going to set the blend mode for all 4 of those flash layers from normal to screen. And you can see how that allows me to blend them in with everything else in this way. So now I've got a few flashes of light around my scene. I might need to tidy things up a little bit because some of these sparks are looking a little bit messy here. So what I'll do is go through each layer in turn. I'll toggle this one off and on so you can see that's the spark over here. I'll add a mask to that layer. Then I can grab the brush tool, set my foreground colour to black, and then paint to hide it in any areas where I don't want it appearing like this. So I can, if we just zoom a little closer here, you can see I can just hide the parts of the flash that I don't want to use. Now I'd also quite like to create kind of a burst of light, so it's kind of like pushing outwards this way, and I can use the liquify filter to do this. So I'll highlight the image thumbnail here on that layer, then I'm going to go to filter, liquify. Now let's zoom in to that flash there, and in the liquify filter we want to make sure we have the show backdrop option checked down here, and that just means I can see the other parts of my image. Then I'm going to use the forward warp tool, and I'm just going to create kind of a swoosh coming out from the gun like this. So I could perhaps push it upwards a little bit as well like this, so it's kind of coming out of the barrel. So you can see I can kind of manipulate the flashes to match the image like this. And we'll see how that looks. I'll hit OK to apply. So now you can see it looks kind of a bit more like gunfire. And of course I can do the same with my other flashes. So let's move on to this flash over here. So I'm just going to toggle these off and on. Let's add a mask to this one just to get rid of this messy streak down here. So again, I grab the brush tool, set my foreground color to black, and then paint to hide this area here. And of course I can go on and perfect my other flashes in the same way, but I think I'll leave it there. So there's a couple of other things I'd like to do. There's a streak of white light here, and this is actually the window in the background in my garage here. So what I need to do is just get rid of that. So I'm just going to add a new layer at the top of my layer stack here, and then I'm going to grab my brush tool again, set my foreground color to black, and paint with black just to remove it like that. And I think I'd like to finish off just by adding a tonal effect on top of everything, just to help bring everything together. And I quite like to do this using the Camera Raw filter. So I'm going to merge a copy of all of my layers here using the keyboard shortcut Command or Control plus Shift Alt and E. And then I'll take this top layer here into the Camera Raw filter. So I'll go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and we could perhaps add a touch of contrast, maybe lift the highlights a little like this, knock down the shadows, maybe add a touch of clarity like this. Let's perhaps knock down the saturation here, and I'd quite like to lower the blue saturation, so I'm going to grab the targeted adjustment tool, and I can right click and target the saturation and drag down to reduce the saturation of the blues and the purples like that. And I'm pretty happy with that, so I'll hit OK to apply, and that's my finished image. So there we go, that's how to combine our toy soldier photos here to create an action-packed battle scene.